So I know that I'm prone to hyperbole, but Escape from Tomorrow is the most dumb, stupid, horrible, inane, awful, ugly movie I've ever seen. If you don't remember what Escape from Tomorrow is, you do remember the hype from when it came out. This is the indie film that was shot guerrilla style in Disneyland and Disney World by some guy named Randy Moore. That's a really cool concept, and everybody was buzzing and curious to see how Disney would respond. And they didn't, by the way. They just, ignored it. Anyway, this will come as a huge shock to you guys, but I'm a big fan of theme parks, so this film was on my radar right away, and as soon as it became available, I had to go see it. And to this day, I remember that as one of the worst film viewing experiences I've ever had. But now I have a YouTube channel, so I decided to revisit it for you guys. You're welcome. So right off the bat, I don't expect or want any of you guys to have to sit through this movie, so I'm gonna give you a summary. Opening credits play over footage of people riding Thunder Mountain Railroad. This is one of the few pleasant moments of the movie because no one is speaking and nothing is happening. Then as the credits end, this happens. Then we meet our main character, Jim. He's on vacation with his family and he gets fired by his boss over the phone.
So you're firing me for no real reason then?
Sorry, old boy. I'm just a messenger. Do give my best to the family. Oh, and don't forget about Soren.
Sorry, old boy. I'm just a real human being that talks like this. Jim decides to keep this a secret from his wife and try to go have one last fun day in the park with his family. They take the monorail to the Magic Kingdom. Jim notices a lot of coughing tourists, and then he fixates on these sexy French teenagers. Jim and his family go on rides. On It's a Small World, Jim has unnerving hallucinations. Jim and his wife Emily split up and they each take one of the kids, then they swap the kids. Emily appears to have fun with the kids in the park. Jim uses his time with first his son and then his daughter to creepily salivate over and stalk the French teenagers, following them to 6 different attractions. Jim's daughter falls and scrapes her knee and they go to first aid. Jim stares lustfully at the nurse's chest and the nurse warns them about something called cat flu. Jim meets a sexy mom who behaves strangely.
Oh, it's humid today. I don't really mind it though.
Jim stares lustfully at her chest and then he's hypnotized, I'm not kidding about this part, by a magical amulet that she's wearing. He suddenly finds himself in her hotel room having sex with her. She chews the scenery for a while.
They call this the presidential suite. What a joke.
She tells Jim that the princesses are prostitutes.
You know the princesses? They're high-priced courtesans.
What?
Rich Asian businessmen, they'll pay thousands for one in costume.
And then Jim just leaves. He meets up with his wife and son back at their hotel. Jim stubs his toe on a chair and then it starts bleeding badly, so he gets Neosporin to put on it, but they call it Geosporic.
What?
The Geosporic.
Oh, yeah. It's over there, I think.
Because they're really paranoid about getting sued. They go to Epcot. Jim gets really drunk, then they meet the princesses, and Jim watches them get groped by rich Asian businessmen.
Rich Asian businessmen, they'll pay thousands for one in costume.
And that wasn't my edit. The voiceover was in the movie. Randy Moore was afraid we would have forgotten that line and been confused. That's not why I'm confused, Randy. Jim and his wife fight, and his wife decides to take their son back to the hotel while Jim stays behind with the daughter. Jim and his daughter ride Soren, and Jim hallucinates that there's a nude woman being projected over the images of hang gliding.
Soon, Jim, you'll be mine. You'll be all mine.
You know, I would expect the naked woman to be like the French teenagers or the sexy nurse or even the sexy mom from before, but instead it's just some new naked woman that we haven't seen before. Anyway, Jim gets off the ride and he sees the French teenagers. One of them approaches him and asks him to join them, but he refuses.
Come with us.
You speak English?
Please, come.
Well, I'm afraid if I come with you, something bad is gonna happen.
But if you don't, something will.
The teenager deliberately and expressionlessly spits on his face, Jim loses his daughter. Jim gets intercepted by security and they taser him in his crotch. I guess it's supposed to be funny. Jim wakes up in a secret lab under the Epcot orb, and a scientist tells him that he's part of a shadowy corporation that's trying to monitor Jim's imagination. Jim squirts Neosporin everywhere in a scene that's framed in a weirdly sexual way. It fries the system and Jim breaks free. He also decapitates the scientist, who turns out to be a robot. Jim somehow realizes that his daughter is with the sexy mom from before, so he goes back to her hotel. He does find his daughter there. She's now been dressed in a princess dress, and the sexy mom is dressed like an evil queen.
You're a witch.
No, I'm a princess. Or at least I used to be.
Happy day, all of you. I love you. I am so happy to be here with you.
Evidently, she used to be a princess at Disneyland, and she shook and hugged a child until her neck broke. Jim argues with her a little. We get the best line delivery in the whole movie.
You're sick. You know that?
Haven't you ever had a fantasy, Jim?
She also says this.
Have you even seen someone decapitated?
What?
It's not like in the movies.
And yeah, not my edit, the movie replays that scene from Thunder Mountain at the beginning because Randy Moore doesn't trust us to remember it. Also, it isn't explained further. Jim takes his daughter back to the hotel. Jim has explosive diarrhea, which, yes, we have to see and hear, and I'm not going to show it. You're welcome. And then Jim coughs up a hairball.
Everyone's so worried about cat flu now. You could be a host and not even know it.
Cat flu.
Yes, the movie both plays the audio of the nurse talking about cat flu and has Jim say cat flu. Because Randy Moore doesn't trust us to know that it's cat flu, because his filmmaking is so subtle. Jim's wife finds him dead the next morning. Jim's family cries. Creepy Disney employees arrive to wipe down the scene and dispose of Jim's body, and they also implant a fake happy memory of riding Buzz Lightyear in his son's head. The van pulls away with Jim's dead body, and then a car pulls up. Jim gets out, but it's like a nicely dressed Jim, and his daughter is a different daughter, and his wife is the naked lady from Soarin'. They're checking in, the end. If you're like, what? I swear it's not because I explained it badly. You have just lived the experience of watching this movie. Now let me unpack some of this stuff. I am just gonna move in a list. Here we go. The legal issues. When this movie came out, like, all of the buzz was centered around the fact that Disney was going to be super mad about it. Like, everyone was like, oh my god, go see it now. The Disney lawyers are going to shut it down. Randy Moore fully tried to capitalize on this too. Like, in interviews, he was always hyperbolically saying what he thought Disney was going to do.
I was thinking this projector would be shut down in the middle of the first screening.
And I guess I wasn't able to find a screenshot of this, but apparently when the film was out, the official website had like a running clock saying this many days without being sued by Disney. It's really funny because in interviews he's really trying to impress upon us this idea that it was an extreme covert operation that required the utmost secrecy. But like, anyone could get away with doing what Randy did. Like, even if they got caught with their lav mics, it would have been such a minor deal. You could just tell security you were shooting a feature for your Disney food vlog channel, of which there are 5 million on YouTube. The actual difficult parts of filming are like, he had to calculate the position of the sun because it was all natural lighting, so he had to think about where he was gonna be and what time of day. Also, it must have been a massive inconvenience to get clear audio from inside the park because they have this copyrighted atmosphere music that's playing pretty much constantly from the moment you enter. And he did a really good job with that. It sounds fine. But hiding the operation? Like, he even said he made their camera crew shave their facial hair so they can blend in because nobody with beards goes to Disneyland. Anyway, this bullet point wasn't meant to talk about the legality of shooting in Disney theme parks without Disney's permission, because I care about that about as little as Disney does. I'm talking about the inclusion of unsuspecting families that are there on vacation, particularly lots of children who, you know, you're not generally supposed to film without permission. And on top of that, they're just kind of being disruptive of other people's vacation experiences, which didn't come cheap. Like, there's a scene where Jim is searching for his daughter while running through the fireworks crowd at Epcot.
You know, it's dark, you're in a crowd, I'm bumping into people, I'm turning, I remember turning a kid around and going, Sarah, is that you?
Anyway, what really rubs me the wrong way about this is that the film is by turns mocking and scornful of the people who want to go to Disneyland. I wouldn't generally care if I was in the background of somebody's shot while I'm walking down Main Street or enjoying the fireworks. But if they're using my image to frame me as part of the slavering masses for having the audacity to enjoy a show at a theme park, I think I'd be pretty mad.
There are a lot of large waistbands. There are a lot of people who've just given up on walking altogether.
This character who's supposed to be like an avatar for the kind of people who enjoy Disney World, he made him like fat and southern and constantly eating, and he put him in one of those electric scooter vehicles. It's like he wants to be like, look at this picture of American laziness and greed. Oh, hey Randy. Thanks for using It's a Small World's only wheelchair-accessible boat and holding up the handicap line for 15 full minutes so you could get that shot of your actor riding and clapping along like a buffoon. I'm sure the people with actual disabilities in the line will understand when you tell them it's for the purpose of making fun of them. Next point, the pacing. There's a lot of talk about how between the film's initial screening and its final release, there were a lot of little edits and cuts made to trim the fat, as Randy Moore explained. If that's true, I can't even imagine what the original cut was like, because the final cut is entirely fat. The way this film conveys every single one of its points is as excruciating as it can possibly be. Like, okay, our protagonist Jim is sexually frustrated. This is basically his only trait. There's a scene in the film where he's riding Winnie the Pooh with his family and he wants to make out with his wife in the back row, and his wife doesn't want to. Now, let's look at the extremely subtle and concise way they convey this fact.
No, honey, what are you doing? No, honey, not now.
What are you worried about, honey? It's around.
Not now.
Come on.
Not now.
What? No one's around. Come on.
Not kids. Take her. No. Take her hands. Honey, not here. No, not in front of the kids. No, stop.
I hope watching that made you feel even a sliver of how painful it was for me to sit through this entire movie. When the family enters the park, they ride Snow White, Winnie the Pooh, and It's a Small World all in a row. And we are shown all three of these rides in sequence with no outdoor scenes in between. When Jim goes off with his son, he rides Autopia, the Tiki Room, and the People Mover. And again, we are shown all three of these. Why? Nearly every scene in this movie just feels like it's trying to kill time. There are so many story elements that are crammed in and then forgotten, but no, the sequence where Jim hallucinates a naked woman in Soarin' Over California had to be 2 full minutes in length. Next point, the acting. I already talked about how paranoid they were about filming in Disneyland, and to me, I am not surprised that the cameras and crew escaped notice. What I'm surprised escaped notice is the acting, because the acting is bad.
It's not scary. I've been on it before.
See? Kid-proof. They make this for little tiny kids.
It's not scary.
I think the mom is fine with what little she's given, and even the kids do a pretty good job, especially for child actors and especially for the environment they were expected to film in. But the lead actor's performance is painful to sit through. Like, look at this incredibly subtle and realistic shot of him having to react to seeing people coughing in line. Everything he does is so goofy and exaggerated.
You know, no one was giving me any, I mean, I'm in every scene of this, and no one was giving me any, like, kudos. And I was kind of like, really, it's all about the buzz. And I understand why. I thought it was more of a comedy. I mean, when I read it, I was like, Oh, this is a comedy.
I think it is a comedy.
Like a Ben Stiller comedy.
Well,
Is how I
don't
look
think
at
it's a Ben Stiller.
Well, I mean,
Oh, this is also really funny to me. The scientist actor at the end, he seems to have really latched onto the idea of fussing with his glasses as a character tick. And Randy Moore loves to combine that with shots of him turning away from the console toward the camera to begin speaking. And finally, we have our holy grail of bad performances, the sexy mom that Jim has sex with.
You're welcome to stay a while. My husband will be back till late. Real blast, wasn't it? People just come here because they want to feel safe. And, you know, smiling's not good for the wrinkles.
Honestly, I can't even hate this because, like, at least when she's on screen, you're having some fun. You're seeing something entertaining, not in the way it's intended to be, but, you know. Like, she's making bad choices, but they're deliberate choices, and I can respect that. Anyway, her character kind of ties into my next point. The women. When this film came out, a lot of critics accused it of feeling very misogynistic, which I think is ridiculous. A lot of the speaking roles in this movie are women, and I think that's really progressive. So let's take a look at some of these characters. Jim's wife, Emily, alternates between just seeming like a normal mom who's trying to have fun with her kids and a crazy, nagging basket case.
Why didn't you answer your phone? You took him on Space Mountain. What's wrong with you? You have to reapply the sunblock before they go swimming. How about a little consideration?
Jim cruelly comments to their son that he doesn't find her attractive.
Is Mommy pretty?
your mother. Yeah, she's beautiful.
I think so too.
Yeah. I mean, not in a classical sense.
There's also this bizarre scene where he swims up to her in the pool and hands her a necklace. The necklace was in his swim trunk pockets. Okay.
Oh.
What?
Dumbo, Jim?
What's the matter?
You got me Dumbo?
Isn't that the one you want?
Minnie Mouse, Jim.
And instead of being like, oh, thanks, she's like, you got me the wrong character, Jim. Although after the way Jim's been acting, maybe I would take an elephant necklace as a veiled insult too. Next up, we have those two French teenagers who are supposed to look so underage that they disturbingly cast one of them to be somebody who still has braces. In one interview, the guy that plays Jim even says that they're supposed to be like 15, which, wow.
They're probably about 15 or 16-year-old girls.
Oh, he also says this.
He's getting led on almost. They're flirting with him too.
Anyway, these girls are written pretty realistically. I've been to loads of theme parks with my hot female friends, and we definitely spend the whole time clinging to each other, giggling, cartwheeling, and seductively eating bananas. You know, that classic theme park food. Bananas. And then, of course, you have the sexy mom character who's like a crazed, villainous sex pot embittered by the loss of her youth. I don't want to like blow you guys' minds with this extreme hot take, but is anyone else getting the vibe that maybe Randy Moore has, I don't know, some kind of problem with women? It's so subtle, but it's there. Okay, Randy Moore was asked specifically about this issue in an interview, and he said, I think the misogyny came in just from the way the whole park is set up and the way the princesses are presented and how stereotypical gender roles are reinforced by the park itself. I think this stale, weak excuse is so emblematic of Randy's whole approach to making this film. His film totally isn't misogynistic, unless it is, in which case it's on purpose. He thinks, because, you know, the Disney princesses are misogynistic. The Disney princesses are misogynistic because he heard it somewhere, like in a BuzzFeed article or something. What aspects of them doesn't he like? And how does making them prostitutes comment on that? He thinks he's making biting original satire, but he's stuck in the frame of mind of like an edgy, hot topic kid. Which brings me to my next point. It's pretentious. There are so many choices made in this film just because Randy Moore thought that that was a thing artistic films do. It's shot in black and white, which was actually a practical decision because Randy knew he wouldn't be able to control any of the lighting, so this kind of makes all of the shots look similar to each other, even if one is totally blown out by the sun and the other one's dark. But then Randy also tries to act like it's part of his artistic process because the old movies. Get it? In the scene in the Epcot Orb, one of the monitors shows this shot of the castle and the Walt Disney statue, and then it pans up to the sky and Jesus is written by like a skywriter. Disneyland's really popular with skywriters because they can't like stop them from doing it, and it's a really good way to have like a captive audience of a lot of people in one place. And like the skywriters are usually Christian ones, so obviously the crew was just there on a day that happened and they shot it, and Randy was like, that's so deep, because it's like ironic because consumerism? Things people watch and enjoy are like a religion. Sports is like a religion. One time I went to a music concert and everybody clapped. Music is like a religion. I stood in a long line to buy groceries. Groceries are like a religion. All of these dumb sheeple buying eggs. Okay, Disney as a religion is hardly a hot take, but it's also not even the central thesis of this movie. So they just threw in the shot because it would look deep. One moment that I think totally exemplifies this derivative, manufactured hot topic edginess is when Jim is talking to the sexy witch mom lady on the bench. She tells him that the turkey leg he's eating isn't really turkey.
Well, if it's not turkey, then what is it?
Emu.
What?
Emu.
Emu?
It's a bird.
And it's like, okay, I get it, Disney packaging pleasant lies, selling them to people, etc. Incidentally, the turkey legs are not emu. The reason they're so big is that they come from boy turkeys who have bigger legs. That's literally it. Okay, I don't care that the film is pushing a mistruth about the Disneyland turkey legs. Like, whatever, it's not a documentary. It's fine. But what bothers me is that this is already an urban legend, and like a super basic one at that. I mean, Sinister Theme Park is such a rich setting for ideas. Could Randy Moore really not think of his own urban legend about Disneyland? It's as unoriginal and unshocking as having the seductress lady be like, they keep Walt's head frozen, you know. I heard that if you shout Andy's coming, the Toy Story characters all drop on the ground. And then this movie has like an intermission with like a title card, and it had an old-fashioned end card too, and it's like, why? My mortal enemy, that fraud Randy Moore, said that this was to give the film an old Hollywood feel. The score, which is actually pretty nice, reflects this too. And in the scenes where he does have control of the lighting, it definitely has like a Twilight Zone kind of vibe. But the way Jim and his family behave, the language the characters use, the story itself, none of that reminds you of old Hollywood. There's no justifiable reason for these stylistic choices, except as like a trick to try to inject some style into your stupid bad movie. Also, it's a bold move to put an intermission in a movie this tedious. You're just giving your audience an opportunity to sneak out without looking rude. Okay, next point. The story is dumb and doesn't make any sense. Okay, far be it from me to point out plot holes in a film that's this unintelligible, but I just want to point to like one thing really quick. So Jim and his family are staying at the Contemporary Hotel. They get on the monorail goes one stop down the line and then stops to let on more passengers. The PA system announces that they are stopping at the Polynesian Resort.
Disney's Polynesian Resort.
And then the French girls get on. But later, Jim and his family are swimming at their hotel pool, and then the French teenagers arrive to tempt Jim with their sexy bikini bodies. But why are they here when they're not even staying at this hotel? But like, maybe this is all happening in Jim's mind anyway, right? So it's not fair to me to hold it to the rules of logic or consistency. But then how come the whole movie we keep snapping back and forth between Jim's hallucinations and reality, and every time he snaps back to reality, the other characters notice and remark that he was behaving strangely? But okay, maybe just the French girls are a figment of Jim's imagination, and no one else can see them except him. But no, Jim's wife and son both see them and comment on Jim staring at them.
Why are we following those girls?
Girls? What girls?
Bonjour. Those girls.
Those Parisian chicks, or whatever they are.
Okay, just calm down.
They're little young Jim. Even for you, don't you think?
We even see the French girls meet a pair of boys their age at the pool, and then in a separate scene that seems totally divorced from Jim's narrative or point of view, we just see the girls and these boys they met enjoying the aquarium at Epcot. And then Jim's wife sees them walk by and one of their faces morphs into like a scary demon face and she's visibly shaken. But Jim's wife isn't having any other delusions. So, like, what's the deal with them? Are they actually demon things? And if so, what was the deal with the aquarium scene? Are they just evil demons of seduction, but also they like to take a lunch break and go look at the aquarium? If that's the answer, then I guess they're the most relatable characters in the film. Halfway through the movie, Jim stubs his toe and it gets like all bloody and infected, but that's not how he gets the cat flu. And then the French girl spits in his face, but it's like the end of the movie, and you're like, if the cat flu's making him hallucinate, he already had it, so maybe cat flu doesn't give you hallucinations? Is it just an additional thing that's happening? Are there just demons and the demons are making weird stuff happen? Or are they just making weird stuff appear to happen? Or are the scientists planting false memories? And then do the demons work for the scientists? Are the demon scientists? And then there's the cat flu outbreak and it's real, but it's unrelated to the demons and the scientists. Is the whole movie a delusion that Jim is having, including the scenes that he's not present for, and also possibly including his own death at the end? Why did they have all these plot threads if they all contradict each other and they didn't develop any of them? I'd say that some of these elements are a waste of screen time, but like, honestly, what even constitutes a waste of screen time in this movie? I don't think a second of this was used wisely. Like, they could have cut out the scientist sequence that didn't explain itself and didn't contribute to the rest of the film, but then we would have gotten, like, what in exchange? 20 minutes of footage of the family watching the Country Bear Jamboree? I mean, I guess I would have preferred that to what they actually showed me. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but I haven't really gotten mean yet, and I'm about to, but before I do that, I'm gonna talk about some of the stuff that I actually liked. I already said that I liked the score. I liked the idea of the cat flu. I like that it's a silly made-up illness instead of bird flu or something, and it makes perfect sense for it to be cats because Disneyland has this giant population of feral cats living all throughout the resort. But it is weird that they didn't have any shots of the feral cats, like to remind you of lurking danger or whatever, because like, it's not hard to get footage of cats at Disneyland. They're basically everywhere that has plants. But anyway, the idea of being at a resort and seeing these signs of outbreak is very creepy and interesting. Honestly, I think I would have enjoyed this movie more if it was just like some cheesy found footage style horror movie set in the park. Oh, and the whole exchange with the nurse was ominous in a way that I liked.
Everyone's so worried about cat flu now. Children are most at risk, so we have to be extra careful. Mommies and daddies, too. You could be a host and not even know it.
Until they ruined it by having her cry when they left. That was just too much. There's one other level on which the creepiness succeeds for me, and it's an accidental one. They shot this film at both Disneyland and Disney World, so if you're very familiar with the layouts of one of the parks, then it feels a little creepy to watch because you'll notice that it's like a weird hybrid, so things aren't where they belong, the geography is inconsistent, and that does give it this scary, dreamlike quality. But I was also aware that this was just done for production reasons and not to enhance the film in any way. It was basically like they started filming in Florida and then they had to finish up the rest when they got home. So it was more laziness than anything else. I liked in the sequence where Jim gets arrested that it's these like retro Epcot hot cops. I thought their outfits were delightful. If I was in charge of a security force, that is 100% what I would dress them like. The last thing I liked was to avoid any legal trouble. They couldn't play any of the copyrighted music. So for the attractions that are entirely musical, he had to commission these like sound-alike songs that were original. So these faux Disneyland songs were so cheesy and goofy and they just made me smile, and that's it. So that's all the stuff I liked, and now it's time to get mean. Our next point is Randy Moore himself. So this movie is very weird in a very confusing way, and usually when I do a video, I will just watch the movie and I will judge it based on its own merits. For this particular video, I actively sought out any interview material that I could find because I could already discern that this film like wasn't working for me, and I was just so curious to see what mind had created it and try to get some idea of like at least what he was going for. So I watched and read basically everything available on the internet with writer-director Randy Moore, and I'm not proud of this, but I basically went from hating the film to hating Randy Moore, the person himself. I know that's really mean. I warned you. First of all, consuming all this Randy content is like a test of fortitude because you start to realize really early on that Randy Moore basically regurgitates all of the same things across all of his interviews everywhere. And I realized that if you look at any individual in any press junket, they tend to get the same unclever questions in every interview. Obviously, there's only a certain number of things they can say. To a degree, it makes sense. But Randy's word-for-word repetition of all of the same anecdotes with all of the same phrasing every time started to make me feel like I was Jim and I was stuck in my own theme park hell. In pretty much every interview, Randy will tell the story about going to Disneyland as an adult with his wife and her comparing it to working in the psych ward.
And she said, this is worse than working the psych floor at the hospital. This is worse than working the psych ward at the hospital. Worse than working the psych floor at the hospital.
Because it's full of screaming children who want $30 princess wands.
There was a moment where we were at this princess fair. There was a moment when we were at a princess fair and kids were just screaming and demanding $30 plastic wands. Demanding $30 plastic wands. $30 plastic wands.
He always says $30 princess wands. It's never a different product. Like, clearly one of his daughters wanted this wand, and instead of just getting it for the poor child, he had to, like, seethe about it for years. Then he'll unfailingly tell the story of seeing Fantasmic and scoffing at all the dumb rubes for their cult-like enjoyment of the show.
There was a Fantasmic show, and at the end of it, Mickey Mouse appears on the top of this mountain. At the top of this mountain. When he appeared, there was just this audible gasp through the entire audience, mostly adults. And mostly even grown, men and women. That magic for them never went away. No one ever told them that Santa Claus wasn't real.
I'm just saying that for a man who spent most of his youth at Disney World and then went at least 30 times to film his project, he seems to have a really short supply of actual anecdotes to support his theses about the kind of people that go to the park. The only other story he ever tells, and he tells this one less often, is that he was walking past the big Epcot orb and he saw like an overweight couple that were embracing each other and taking a nap in the shadow under the orb. If I saw that, I'd probably be like, oh, that's kind of cute. And I'd probably also be like, I think they drank too much at the Food and Wine Festival. But in an extremely confusing moment, Randy talks at length about how this was this couple's dream.
You realize, like, this is their fantasy come true. They just wanted to lie down and, underneath this ball in this place.
And how pathetic he finds that. Like, at any given moment that you see strangers, they must be living their dreams.
And I don't know if they were on their honeymoon or if they were just in love or just so happy to be in Epcot.
I don't see drunk college students eating at Denny's at 3 a.m. and extrapolate that this must be their dream and they're squandering their lives.
But maybe they take some ecstasy or something.
It just, to me, it kind of sounds like Randy had a lousy vacation with his family, and instead of like writing that one off, he decided that he was so upset he had to go write a feature-length film about how it was the theme park's fault. My wife was fed up with me on vacation because theme parks are evil. I didn't get invited to parties in high school because I was too smart for them. Also, he usually calls Disney a religious experience.
Going there is like going to church for them. It's like a religious experience going there. This, giant like religious like moment. It's like a corporate religion. It's a corporate religion.
He refers to Mickey Mouse appearing as being like the second coming.
It was like a religious experience for them, as if they were witnessing the second coming. Like they had seen, the second coming or something.
And he always conflates being nostalgic about something with being indoctrinated.
And, obviously these people had been like indoctrinated since they were children. We're all sort of indoctrinated from that age. We were indoctrinated early, indoctrination.
Like the story of the couple sleeping under the Epcot orb, Randy has decided that he's the authority on exactly what emotions everyone attaches to Disney World. And he says the answer is too many emotions, and people should feel bad, and they should be sad and bitter and make independent films. Oh, here's another thing I found out in interviews. Remember when I said I thought that the cat flu thing was clever because feral cats? Well, That was foreshadowing. If I was Randy Moore, I would play you a flashback of me saying it because I don't trust you to remember it. Anyway, I read an interview with Esquire and it seems like Randy doesn't even know there are feral cats at Disneyland. That was all a coincidence. It turns out the reason it's cat flu is that like the flu is antithetical to the happiness that people feel in the park, and cats are the opposite of mice. Like Mickey Mouse. Oh my god. This is the same interview where Randy says that, yeah, he does think the emu thing is true. So I guess he really did think he was pulling the curtain back on some dark Disney secret in that scene. There are some people online who believe it, and when I wrote it, I totally believed it. Now, I don't know. I need to test it. I need to go get one of those legs and bring it to a lab or something. I've never seen turkey legs in real life like the ones that they have. Oh my god, Randy, you can just ask. Just ask them. They're not allowed to sell you food and refuse to tell you what's in it. My favorite moment in any of these interviews is when this guy tried to ask Randy why the hallucinations happened in Small World when it was so early in the movie and nothing else had happened around it yet.
And that happens early in the film, and then it feels like there's a bit of a break before the hallucination. Was that just like a... What were you getting at with putting it right there? Because it seems like you could have built gradually.
Randy doesn't have an answer.
Well, Small World just lends itself to being such a strange experience.
Jim has hallucinations in Small World because Randy thinks Small World is creepy. The hallucinations don't do anything for the story, and they don't explain themselves. It's so obvious that Randy just went in the park and shot a bunch of scenes without thinking how they were gonna go together, because if he had had Jim alone on that ride with one of the kids, he could have put it much later in the movie, but the whole family's together, so he couldn't change that in editing. And okay, I have to talk about the weird sex stuff. Perversion and sexuality is such an overwhelming theme in this movie, but it's not a theme that ever says anything or culminates in any way. But the movie is more devoted to this than any of its other themes. And no, Randy doesn't bring up this theme in any of the interviews. He only talks about it when it's brought up to him specifically first. And whenever he is asked, it seems like he's somewhat surprised, like he didn't realize that this was all in there. And honestly, that makes it so much weirder. If he just came in hot on the interviews, yeah, it's a movie about weird sex stuff, he'd be like, at least I understand. Let me hit you with another Randy quote. These girls that Disney World hires are all beautiful, but this is supposed to be the least sexualized place there is, so I feel like there's a big sexual repression inside that park. Okay, the princess performers are beautiful, but their costumes deliberately are very unsexy and have a lot of coverage. They're wearing these garish colors that only children would find appealing. They're wearing a lot of layers. They're covered collarbone to ankle in most cases. Even the outfits that are sexy in the movies are very deliberately unsexified for the theme park versions. I mean, this isn't Hooters, Randy. By Randy's logic, any public setting where there are beautiful women and you're not allowed to grope them is a place of great sexual repression. Isn't that most places? Nobody tell Randy about shopping malls or that one Applebee's with the pretty waitress. I mean, God, I've never seen someone wear their baggage so boldly on their sleeve before. He even tries to insinuate that Tom Sawyer Island is secretly sexual because there's a sign where everything is spelled phonetically, so welcome is spelled welcome, because, get it? I like that in that interview, the editor was even a little salty. The most insane part is that Randy thinks Jim is a character we're supposed to root for.
When I started handing the script around to people, in my mind, he's definitely, he's on the line between being a hero and anti-hero the whole time. But I didn't realize how much people didn't like the character.
The guy that's losing his mind and spends the whole film failing to parent his children and lusting after underage girls.
So when it came time to cast, I knew I needed to find someone who was instantly likable. No matter what he was doing, sort of like Michael Douglas in Fatal Attraction, you would go along with him and you'd root for him.
I guess that's why Jim is rewarded at the end by going to heaven or purgatory or whatever and having a hot wife. Okay, I get it. I'm sorry the sinful princesses caused you to lust, Randy. Okay, let's move on to the themes. So I already complained about the events as they unfold in this story, but what is this story about? So first, I'm going to defer to the people involved in making it, and they all seem to have different answers, and even among the same individuals, their answers change in every interview. The actress who played the mom claimed it was in some way about a family.
It's more about the story between a husband and wife and the family.
But this movie isn't really about family at all. Like, the family members other than Jim are just blank slates. And Jim's interactions with them are inconsistent. You can't tell if he really cares about his kids. It's just like, why are they even there?
The disintegration of a marriage.
It's not about the dissolution of a marriage either. I mean, Jim and Emily's relationship starts the movie bad and then just kind of stays bad. We didn't see them before, so we don't know how it got to this point, and it doesn't escalate during the movie. In fact, even up till the end, you get the impression that when Emily goes back to the hotel, she's not planning on ending their marriage. When the family finds Jim dead, they seem devastated by it, so you get the impression that maybe typically he's a good father and husband, but we don't see any of that. I don't like Jim. I'm happy that he's dead. Sorry. There's even this one insufferable moment where Emily looks at the Dumbo necklace like, you're supposed to be thinking that she's regretting being so harsh with him, like, I should have been kinder. And it's like, no, you shouldn't have.
But I also wanted to sort of like go from the external experience to like the internal experience of what people, feel when they're on these rides.
I don't know, is the internal experience of riding Autopia to be overcome with lust? I mean, it is for me ever since Honda added that robot to the ride. The one really consistent thing is that everyone involved is like, it's not about Disneyland. Disneyland is the backdrop. But most of the runtime is just footage of people being in Disneyland. They could have informed us that Jim was following the French girls with like 1 or 2 rides or like a single scene, but instead he goes to 6 different rides and we see every single one of them. It's the bulk of the runtime. And okay, even though it apparently wasn't deliberate, I'm gonna look at the sex theme too. Jim's sexuality is repressed because he's at Disney World. And that's bad, right? Because repression is bad. But Jim's sexual interest is directed toward girls who are underage, so it's good that it's repressed, right? Jim's rejection of the French girl is immediately followed by him getting tasered and kidnapped, so he should have gone with them? But the French girls are scary demons, right? So is it just like a different bad thing would have happened if he'd gone with them? Randy sets himself free from the scientist by holding the tube of Geosporin at crotch level and squirting it all over the lab, including onto holographic images of a nude woman. It's not very subtle. It's so not subtle that I feel like I can't even play the clips of it without getting my video flagged. So him not being sexually repressed anymore is what saved him, right? But the sexy evil mom witch queen is a sexually liberated character, and she's portrayed as villainous and weird and crazy. But then at the end, Jim is trapped in Disney World in this like heaven or purgatory state, and he has his sexy hot wife that was naked on Soarin', so he's been like rewarded and his sexual appetites are fulfilled. But he's at Disney World, and that's where your sexual appetites are supposed to be repressed, right? So which is it? Like, what's going on with this theme? The most puzzling angle to the question of theme is that in every interview, Randy Moore talks about how when he was a kid, he went to Disney World with his divorced dad every summer.
It was a place that I'd been going to ever since I was, 2 or 3 years old with my father who lived in Orlando, and we'd spend, a great deal of time, if not, it would seem to me like all of our time there when I was with him. And so it was this very, very special, intimate, magical time that we spent together. And then, we sort of had a falling out when I was older. It wasn't until I went back with my own kids that all of a sudden, all of these like emotions and complicated feelings I had towards him sort of resurfaced.
Now to me, I hear this and I can't help but notice that Disney World itself is like a giant convenient metaphor to Randy's real life relationship with his father without anyone having to write it that way. So hear me out. Randy's only hot take about Disney World seems to be that everything's fake, which yeah, okay, but that could tie in really well to his issues with his dad. We have this concept of the divorced dad that doesn't know how to relate to his son, so he takes him to Disney World, and when the son's a child, these are happy memories, and then he grows up and he realizes that there's no real foundation to their relationship, so it starts to crumble. If you have that relationship set up, and that metaphor is like a jumping off point for your story about sinister things happening in a theme park, I feel like you could build something really interesting off of that. Like maybe instead of the central cast being horny dad Jim and his generic family family, you could just have it be the father and the son. You know, like maybe this is the summer after the son graduated high school and he's gonna go to college and maybe not see his dad anymore, and it's like their last big hurrah together, and then they go to the theme park, but nothing's the same, and creepy things are happening, and they have to get out of this together and confront truths about themselves. I don't know. You could even leave in the weird sex stuff. You could have like the son get drunk and hook up with one of the princess performers, and she could have like a monologue about, oh, you do all these meet and greets with these kids and you have to pretend that there's this affection that's not really there and it's all just a front. Then she could have some expository dialogue about whatever your weird conspiracy story is. There's one line that the crazy witch mom lady has in the movie. It's like, you can't be happy all the time, and I feel like maybe that was supposed to be the thesis because they included it in the trailer too. But people that go to Disney World don't think you have to be happy all the time. They hope that vacations will make them happy because people like to travel and to have time off work and to go on roller coasters. Family vacations don't make people stress because there's something inherently sinister about the idea of theme parks. It's just like some people go and they have a fun day, and then other people get overwhelmed and it's hot out and they spend a long day on their feet and things boil to the surface and they get cranky. Look, I just solved the mystery of human behavior and I didn't have to make a feature-length film about a middle-aged man leering at teenagers. Anyway, Randy Moore is a genius because he doesn't like fun things that everybody else likes.
I just wanted to really explore that feeling that people have, and that mania, which I think I tried to get at the end of the movie. You know, you just see the mania of people just coming in and like almost like they're going off the cliff together.
I assume that when he said going off the cliff, he was trying to make a reference to migrating herds of lemmings that will run over a cliff. If you're a dumb, faux intellectual, it can be fun to compare any crowd or line of people to lemmings running off a cliff to try to indicate that they don't have a capacity for free thought. Ironically, that's an untrue and regurgitated thought in itself. Yeah, it's interesting that he reminded me of lemmings. In the wild, lemmings that are in mass migration might unintentionally drown themselves if they try to cross a body of water that's too wide without gauging the distance first, but they don't actually run off of cliffs. That misconception actually comes from a wildlife program from the 1950s. They shipped in these captive lemmings and then built a set with like turntables and faked the migration scenes, and then at the culmination of this, the film crew scared the lemmings over a cliff just to get a dramatic shot. That wildlife program I'm talking about was called White Wilderness, and it was made by Walt Disney Productions. Hey, look, a metaphor about following the crowd that's also directly tied into a fake and exploitative thing that Disney did. Maybe Randy could have tied that into his movie if he had a single creative bone in his hack body. Wait a second. The director's name is Randy Moore. And the movie is about his dad issues? His dad. Randy's dad. This movie is about Jim, a father, going to Disney World and being really horny over things. Jim is a horny father. A Randy dad. It can't be that simple.
I remember coming home telling my wife, like, well, I'll just, do it, and when I'm done, whatever, it'll be another project.